You think Christmas candy in the 1970s meant just chocolate bars and candy canes from the store. Think again. They're real candies that sat in fancy dishes on living room tables all across the country before big candy companies took over. Making Christmas candy at home was what December was all about. Let's look at 25 Christmas candies from the 1970s that have almost completely disappeared. Treats that most people under 50 have never even heard of, let alone tasted. 1. Penuche. Penuche was no ordinary fudge. This was the rich brown sugar classic that separated the casual candy dabblers from the true artisans. Penuche stood tall as a sweet square of buttery caramelized pride, not just chocolate's cousin, but a sophisticated original. Across kitchens in the Midwest and New England, its name, borrowed from the Mexican panela, was whispered with reverence. Getting it right wasn't a lucky guess, it was kitchen science. One wrong move, just a 5 degrees mistake, and you'd end up with grainy grit or a syrupy mess. Brown sugar, butter, milk, and salt simmered in a heavy pot, stirred without mercy until the temp hit that golden 238 degrees F softball stage. Then came the trickiest part, untouched cooling till it fell to 110 degrees, then vigorous beating until that glossy sheen turned matte. The aroma of caramel filled the house, dark and full of molasses magic. It was poured, scored, and crowned with walnut halves. At bake sales, this candy wasn't just a treat, it was a trophy. Today, Penuche is mostly forgotten, lost to a fast-paced world that no longer waits for sugar to be perfect. 2. Divinity. If a candy could float in on a snowflake, it would be Divinity. These pillowy puffs of vanilla-scented sweetness were the showstoppers of 1970s candy trays, light as air and white as winter snow. With southern roots that spread far and wide, Divinity was the crown jewel of December treats, as beautiful as it was temperamental. You didn't dare make it when the weather was humid, the clouds would weep, and your candy would stick. Weather forecasts were part of the ingredient list. Making Divinity required 2 people, impeccable timing and nerves of steel. Sugar, water, corn syrup boiled to 260 degrees F while egg whites were whipped into stiff perfection. Then, like a kitchen magic trick, boiling syrup streamed into the egg whites while the beaters never stopped moving. A glossy cloud formed, beaten for 15 long minutes until it stood tall. Dropped quickly onto wax paper, each piece received a pecan crown. The dual texture, crisp exterior, heavenly melt-in-your-mouth center was unforgettable. Divinity wasn't just candy, it was theater. Evidence of a time when candy making was more than a recipe, it was a full-day performance of patience, precision, and tradition. 3. Bourbon Balls. Dark, boozy, mysterious. Bourbon Balls were the mischievous little candies that lived on the adult end of the holiday dessert table. One bite was enough to deliver a warm Kentucky bourbon glow and make grown-ups grin like kids sneaking dessert before dinner. Born in the heart of bourbon country and quickly adopted all across the country during the 1970s, these spirited treats were both classy and a little rebellious. You couldn't find these at kid-friendly Christmas parties. They were reserved for cocktail nights and velvet-lace soirees, often making their appearance once the kids were tucked in. Making them couldn't have been easier. Take vanilla wafers and crush them to crumbs, then stir in powdered sugar, cocoa, chopped pecans, corn syrup, and of course, a healthy pour of bourbon. Roll them into little 1-inch delights and coat with nuts or more sugar. They mellowed as they sat, reaching perfection after a night in a metal tin. The flavor journey started with dark cocoa, moved to nutty crunch, and closed with that signature bourbon note lingering like a winter fireplace. They disappeared in part due to modern anxieties, alcohol near children, oh my. But back then, they brought a spark to every gathering. 4. Chocolate peppermint creams. Imagine a holiday treat so refined, it could rival the work of the finest chocolatiers, and it came straight from your neighbor's kitchen. Chocolate peppermint creams were homemade elegance in every bite, marrying Christmas's favorite flavor duo for a result you wouldn't believe came from scratch. Throughout the 70s, This candy was a badge of honor for those daring to go beyond cookie cutters and frosting. Gifted in tins tied with glittery ribbons, laid out on dessert tables at family dinners or carefully boxed for teachers, these creams were the definition of thoughtful. First, the cool peppermint center was mixed from powdered sugar, rich butter, cream, and extract, worked until it formed a soft dough. Rolled thin, cut into perfect shapes and left to sit overnight. The next day brought their transformation. Dipped in semi-sweet chocolate melted down with a touch of paraffin for shine, using only a fork and steady hands to coat each. Once set on wax paper, they looked and tasted like prestige. The balance was divine, dark chocolate yielding to a chilly mint fondant that was smooth, firm, and sophisticated. Homemade, yes, but equal to anything behind a glass display at the fanciest sweet shop. 5. Peanut Brittle. Long before it was wrapped in crinkly plastic at gas stations, peanut brittle held power and danger in its golden, glossy sheets. This was a candy that let you know it had arrived with a crack loud enough to summon the whole house. It was as beautiful as glass and twice as fragile, sweet, salty, and tough on fillings. In 1970s kitchens, brittle was serious business. The debate over how to make it raged like a family feud. Raw vs roasted peanuts, butter versus margarine, light versus dark corn syrup. Especially in southern homes, brittle recipes were prized like family heirlooms. Once begun, the process moved at lightning speed. Sugar, corn syrup, salt, and water were boiled to the exacting 300 degrees F mark, what candy makers dubbed the hard crack stage. From there, peanuts and butter joined the bubbling chaos for a hot minute before baking soda turned the whole mix into a foaming science experiment. It had to be poured fast straight onto buttered marble or a pan and spread thin just before it turned into candy concrete. The crunch was legendary. The flavor, deep caramel, roasted peanut, and a whisper of bitterness that made the sweetness shine brighter. It was edible alchemy. 6. Opera creams. Elegant, delicate, and dipped in tradition, opera creams weren't candies you made. They were the ones you bought, always from the good candy shop downtown, tucked inside a satin-lined box. These were the upscale stars of the 1970s holiday scene. A culinary status symbol, opera creams whispered old-school class. Their fondant centers came in pale pink, soft yellow, ivory white, classic, refined shades. The flavors: vanilla, strawberry, maple, lemon, sometimes a surprise cherry or orange, all wrapped in glossy chocolate shells. Each one looked perfect, same size, same shape, each topped with a decorative candy flower or swirl. They melted the second they touched your tongue. No crunch, no chew, just smooth, creamy sweetness dissolving to nothing. These weren't grab-a-handful candies. You gave them to the minister, a boss, your child's teacher, people who mattered. They came in gold boxes with curled ribbons because they were more than just desserts. Opera creams represented aspiration, a taste of refinement during the most festive time of year. Sadly, they vanished along with the small shops that birthed them, replaced by mass-market truffles that might sparkle but never sing quite the same. 7. Coconut bonbons. Little snowy balls of chewy sweetness. Coconut bonbons were the ultimate crowd pleaser for holiday get-togethers. Even more, they were a rare treat that kids could help make without risk of ruining the batch. In a world of temperamental sugar stages and tricky timing, these were the forgiving gems of Christmas candy trays. All through the 70s, they showed up at school bake sales, church bazaars, and busy kitchens where moms and daughters bonded over bowls of sticky coconut. With just 3 main ingredients and zero stovetop drama, they were easy on the wallet and still looked festive. Sweetened flaked coconut got mixed with condensed milk into a sticky white dough, finished with vanilla or almond for flair. Rolled into 1-inch balls and rolled again in powdered sugar, each one rested on wax paper to firm up. Some added maraschino cherries to the center for a surprise. Some dipped them in melted chocolate for extra decadence. The final texture was a dream, moist, chewy, and coconut-forward in a way that no modern candy even attempts. They were unapologetically sweet, but somehow irresistible. The kind of bite that turned coconut skeptics into true believers during the most wonderful time of the year. 8. Chocolate fudge. Rich, dense, and impossibly smooth chocolate fudge was the holy grail of any 1970s Christmas candy plate. This wasn't a store-bought imitation. This was homemade mastery, passed down through generations of women who knew their way around a saucepan. Fudge making was tradition, as embedded in the holidays as trimming the tree or hanging stockings. Come December, kitchens became laboratories of chocolate experimentation, with fierce debates over marshmallow cream versus heavy cream, or whether stirring too soon would ruin the batch. Perfection was hard-won. You needed sugar, cocoa, butter, and milk, all heated gently in a heavy pan, stirred just so to avoid scorch marks. Then came the test, 234 degrees F, the softball stage. Drop a spoonful into cold water and watch for the delicate ball to appear. Once off the heat, the magic began. You beat the mixture with a wooden spoon, no shortcuts, until it loses its gloss. Usually, your arms ached by the 10-minute mark. Then it was poured, left to cool, and sliced into pure bites of chocolatey bliss. Each piece had that faint grain from real sugar crystals, soft melt on the tongue, and just a touch of bitterness. That's how you knew it was homemade, fudgy, not fake. 9. Seafoam. Airy, pale, and mysterious, Seafoam candy was the sweet that made people stop and ask, "What even is that?" It didn't taste like the sea, but it carried a name and appearance that hinted at waves, clouds, and something ethereal. Light green or creamy ivory in color, Seafoam sat between honeycomb and fudge, a texture all its own. It somehow looked both delicate and indulgent, and that contrast is what made it such a standout. If Divinity had a more caramelized, quirky cousin, this was her. Making Seafoam meant combining brown and white sugar with corn syrup and water, heating it to 260 degrees, and slowly, carefully, adding it to stiff egg whites while beating the whole time. Vanilla and a pinch of salt were key. You'd know when it was ready, thick, sticky, glossy. Spoonfuls dropped fast onto wax paper, topped with pecans or mellow chocolate chips. The true magic was the bite. A crisp shell that shattered into a soft, airy inside with whispers of molasses and caramel flavor. It was sweeter than Divinity, yet somehow less overwhelming. And unlike today's candies, where everything tastes the same, Seafoam was unique, a fluffy piece of confectionery history that's nearly vanished. 10. Pralines. Pralines were the southern belle of the Christmas candy dish, velvety, nut-studded discs that barely held their shape before melting into pure caramel bliss. These weren't the hard pralines of Europe. No, these were soft and creamy, perfected in New Orleans kitchens and passed northward through women's magazines and church cookbooks. In the 70s, a tin of pralines was a high compliment, wrapped in lace or cellophane and passed to hosts, choir directors, or cousins you hadn't seen since Easter. At holiday fundraisers, women competed for the most melt-in-your-mouth batch. Hitting that perfect texture was a delicate dance. Too hard, fail. Too soft, they de-glue themselves together. But just right pralines were utterly divine. They began with brown sugar, white sugar, cream, and butter, cooked down in a heavy pot until the mixture reached 236 degrees F. Then pecan halves were stirred in along with vanilla. The key moment came fast. As soon as the gloss faded, you had to move, spooning out perfect rounds onto wax paper before it stiffened. The flavor was rich like nothing else, buttery, caramelly, balanced with crunchy, soft pecans. Modern kitchens struggle to replicate them, especially up north. But in the 70s South, pralines were pure holiday gold. 11. Molasses Taffy. Molasses Taffy wasn't just candy. It was an event, the kind that summoned cousins, coated hands in butter, and filled the house with laughter and the smell of the past. Made from dark molasses and sugar boiled into oblivion, it demanded strength, patience, and company. Taffy pulls were real social affairs before Christmas, family traditions where kids took turns pulling the sticky ropes until they gleamed. This wasn't casual candy making. It was hands-on, muscle-burning work. And that was the fun of it. With roots stretching back to colonial days, molasses taffy kept its charm into the homey kitchens of the 1970s. You'd boil molasses with vinegar, sugar, butter, and water to a firm ball stage of 265 degrees F, then pour it onto a buttered tray to cool. Once it reached just tolerable temperature, everyone slathered their hands in butter and got to work, pulling, stretching, folding. Over 15 to 20 minutes, the near-black mass would lighten to a golden brown, gaining shine and snap. The process was the memory, the candy was the prize. It vanished in an era of convenience, but once it turned kitchens into playgrounds and made molasses taste like Christmas cheer. 12 caramels. Soft, chewy, and wrapped like little presents in twists of wax paper, homemade caramels were pure, buttery luxury. This wasn't the sticky taffy found at checkout aisles. This was elevated candy, the kind that took serious time, real ingredients, and undeniable candy-making skill. In 1970s suburbia, offering someone a homemade caramel wasn't just sharing a sweet, it was sharing your pride. These gems showed up in polished tins at dinner parties, their golden wrappers a sign of effort. Making them required constant attention. Sugar, cream, butter, and syrup bubbled away while being stirred nonstop for what felt like forever. The pot had to stay at medium heat or you'd risk scorching. The target, 248 degrees F firm ball stage with your arm doing the work the whole time. At the finish, a splash of vanilla added warmth. Poured into a buttered pan and left to rest overnight, they were then cut into perfect bite-sized cubes. Each square got wrapped with love. The texture was magic, holding shape but soft enough to melt slowly with each bite. It wasn't just the flavor, rich with cream and butter, that made them special. It was the time, the attention, the gift of something handcrafted. 13. Butterscotch Drops. Butterscotch Drops, hard amber discs that glowed like golden sunspots, took their sweet time cooking, and it was worth every minute. Their magic began with aroma alone. Brown sugar and butter mingling in a thick syrup that filled every corner of the house with mouth-watering warmth. These weren't chewy, soft candies. These were slow melters, shimmering and solid, dissolving like winter icicles on the tongue. In 70s homes, butterscotch drops were deceptively simple. Just brown sugar, corn syrup, butter, and a few splashes of vinegar to fight off sugar crystals. But you had to watch that pot like a hawk. After dissolving the sugar, the mixture had to sit undisturbed, boiling until it hit 300 degrees F hard crack. No stirring, no distractions. When it hit that deep golden hue, it was poured immediately by hand, spoonful by spoonful, onto buttered pans. Each drop froze in place like stained glass, some with ripples or darker swirls where the sugar had caramelized just a bit more. They weren't flashy or filled, just pure butter-laced sugar essence. You'd slowly suck on them, wave after wave of flavor rolling in. Modern candy can be loud and overdone, but in these simple discs lived the taste of patience and precision. 14. Toffee. Toffee was the definition of grown-up Christmas candy, a serious, buttery crunch layered with rich chocolate and toasted almonds. Not fussy, but fancy. In the 1970s, English toffee wasn't just a treat, it was a holiday flex. There it sat, broken into rugged shards, nestled in decorative tins lined with wax paper, ready to shatter under your teeth into something unforgettable. If peanut brittle was rustic, toffee was refined. But don't be fooled, toffee was demanding. Made from just butter and sugar, it called for a careful eye and constant stirring to avoid separation. Cooked over heat until it turned from pale gold to deep amber, the mix danced its way to 300 degrees F. Timing mattered. Texture mattered. Add almonds at just the right moment, stir, then spread the golden lava thin across a sheet pan. As it cooled, you melted chocolate over the top and finished it with more crushed almonds. Once it set, you broke it into jagged pieces of heaven. The flavor layered. First, the dark sweetness of caramelized butter, then the melt of chocolate, and finally the nutty crunch. It was bold, complex, and surprisingly adult. Less sugary than you'd expect, but all the better for it. 15. Nougat. Nougat was confectionery ambition in chewy form. A bold, fluffy candy loaded with nuts and jewel-toned candied fruits that looked like stained glass windows when sliced. This wasn't an everyday sweet. It was a challenge, the kind only the bravest home cooks attempted at Christmas, hoping to create something as good as the glossy nougat bar in fancy candy shops. And if done right, it was better. Soft, white, and dense, nougat had texture you had to respect, a firm bite, but never sticky. The ingredients list read like a candy maker's exam. Beaten egg whites, honey, 2 sugar syrups each at different temps, and toasted almonds and pistachios. You had to juggle hot sugar at 250 degrees F and hotter sugar at 320 degrees F, then add both to the egg whites while beating everything constantly. Once it thickened, you folded in the fruit and nuts, poured it into rice paper-lined pans, and pressed fast before it set. There was no room for hesitation. When it was ready, you'd slice it into perfect squares and marvel at each glossy, nut-studded piece. The taste, vanilla and honey sweet with savory crunch throughout. It was a triumph, a home run for anyone skillful enough to dare. 16. Peppermint Bark. Modern, clean, beautiful. Peppermint Bark looked like it came from a glossy magazine page, but in the 1970s it became one of the most beloved homemade Christmas candies, and for good reason. Though simple at heart, it delivered tons of festive flair and an unbeatable flavor burst that made it a crowd pleaser at every holiday gathering. People couldn't believe you made it yourself. The secret? Layers. First, you melted semi-sweet or dark chocolate, then spread it evenly on a parchment-lined tray. Let it chill completely. Then, white chocolate, creamy, mild, spiked with peppermint extract, poured on top of the dark layer like a winter frosting. Quickly, you pressed crushed candy canes into the surface. The result was candy that needed no decorating. Red and white stripes danced across cream and cocoa like holiday fireworks. Once hardened, the whole sheet got cracked into random shards. Each bite delivered contrast, bitter dark chocolate cut by white chocolate's smoothness, crushed mint providing crunch and a cooling aftereffect. It was simple to make but felt gourmet. Easily giftable, happily shareable, and maybe best of all, it's the 1970s treat that never disappeared. A beautiful intersection of taste and tradition that's still going strong. 17. Cherry Cordials. There was something almost magical about biting into a cherry cordial. That moment when the chocolate shell cracked and flooded your mouth with cherry syrup and a soft maraschino center. It felt like a trick, a secret, a tiny explosion of holiday indulgence. In the polished world of 1970s holiday candy, cordials held a top-tier spot, luxurious, mysterious, and reserved for candy boxes wrapped in foil and ribbon. But for those adventurous enough, they could actually be made at home. The trick, time and fondant. You wrapped each cherry in a layer of thick fondant just firm enough to hold its shape. Then you waited. After a long overnight rest, the cherry juice slowly broke down the fondant into a sweet syrup. When the moment was right, you dipped them one by one into chocolate, careful to keep the coating smooth and clean. Allow to set and prepare for candy magic. The first bite was everything. A snap of chocolate giving way to a cascade of liquid sweetness, and a cherry that managed to be both bright and nostalgic. Their elegance made them perfect for special occasions. Cordials weren't fast or easy, but they were unforgettable candy that performed. 18. Marzipan Fruits. Tiny fruits, perfectly painted and shaped by hand, marzipan candies were edible art, bringing a touch of elegance and imagination to Christmas dessert tables. These weren't just candy, they were sculpted treasures, so realistic it felt wrong to eat them. Made from almond paste and powdered sugar, marzipan hailed from Europe but found its way into 1970s holiday spreads thanks to gourmet magazines and upscale shops. For artistic home bakers, making marzipan fruits was more than a recipe. It was an afternoon project with quiet joy baked in. You'd knead the smooth almond paste until it was pliable, add food coloring in subtle shades, lemon yellow, strawberry red, apple green, and sculpt by hand. A clove became a perfect stem. A toothpick helped form dimples. A food coloring brush gave each piece texture and life. Arranged on fancy plates, they looked like miniature still lifes. The flavor was simple but bold, sweet almond with a whisper of bitterness. Each bite was soft, luxurious, and slow to melt, fusing decoration with dessert. In an era when looks didn't always matter at the table, marzipan insisted on beauty. It wasn't just candy, it was Christmas as a craft. 19. Turkish Delight. Mysterious, silky, sweet with a floral surprise, Turkish Delight was the candy that felt like a hidden treasure brought back from a faraway land. For many Americans in the 1970s, it was a treat they'd only read about in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But for the adventurous home cook, it was real and worth every strange, sticky step. Soft, jellied cubes dusted in powdered sugar, that's all it looked like at first glance. But the flavor. Rose water or orange blossom with hints of spice, making it wasn't as straightforward as other candies. You needed lemon juice, sugar, and water, yes, but also unfamiliar elements like mastic and cornstarch slurry that acted like culinary glue. Once boiled and thickened, the sticky gel was poured into pans, set overnight, then sliced into little jewels, glistening, delicate, and coated in fine white powder. The texture was unlike any American candy, semi-firm, cushiony, almost gummy, yet smooth. The flavor sparked debate. Some called it perfumed, others found it too soapy. But those who loved it were loyal. Turkish Delight brought the world to your kitchen, an exotic escape packed into a bite-sized, powdered square of courage. 20. Fondant. In the background of so many perfect holiday candies was one unsung hero, fondant. It didn't sparkle like toffee or shine like chocolate, but without it, half of Christmas confections couldn't exist. Fondant was the base, the candy maker's canvas, made of melted sugar and transformed from syrup into something malleable, delicate, and creamy smooth. Women in the 1970s knew its importance. Church cookbooks had pages of variations, and mothers taught daughters how to perfect the technique. It wasn't meant to be eaten plain, though its pure sweetness and silky texture made even that a pleasure. More often, fondant became the filling in peppermint creams, the secret to cherry cordials, or the shaping tool for dipped truffles. To make it, you boiled sugar, water, and cream of tartar to 238 degrees F, poured it onto marble or trays, let it cool, then worked it like dough using a spatula or wooden paddle. Repeat, repeat. Then suddenly, magic, it turned from translucent to a snow-white paste. Wrapped in plastic and rested overnight, it became bendable elegance. Flavored and colored any way you liked. It was sugar, yes, but also possible. Candy clay for the home artist. 21. Lemon sugar cookies. Bright, tangy, and soft in the middle, lemon sugar cookies were that unexpected burst of sunshine in the middle of winter. If chocolate and spice ruled the holiday cookie world, these zesty treats were the quiet rebels, crowd pleasers every grandma swore by for good reason. Made with real lemon juice and zest, they hit that delicate balance of sweet and tart that danced on your tongue. During the 1970s, these cookies weren't just desserts. They were memories baked for school lunches, church bake sales, or slipped into cookie tins just because. Biting into one was like being reminded that even in snowy December, something bright was possible. They were chewy in the center, just crisp on the edges, with a thin lemon glaze drizzled artfully on top, made from powdered sugar and fresh lemon juice, creating a citrusy shimmer. Simple, yes, but their impact was lasting. Kids loved them, adults appreciated them, and grandmas adored how easy they were to bake. You didn't need colored sprinkles or fancy cutters. These cookies stood confidently on flavor alone, sweet joy with a twist, and often they disappeared long before the chocolate chip ones did. 22. Gingerbread cookies. Warm spice, sweet aroma. Gingerbread cookies weren't just holiday treats, they were part of the season's heart and soul. In every kitchen, the smell of ginger, cinnamon, and cloves meant Christmas had truly arrived. These cookies carried flavors that had echoed through centuries, from ancient ceremonial offerings all the way to modern kitchen tables. In my childhood home, making gingerbread was more than baking, it was tradition. Grandma would shape them into perfect little gingerbread men, stars, and hearts, then set out bowls of colored icing, sprinkles, and candies for us to decorate each one with care. It wasn't about perfection. It was about expression. The Middle Ages gave us the first spiced cookies. By the 16th century, gingerbread had taken its familiar form, and by the 1970s, it was loved by kids and adults alike. Grandma's version was soft but held its shape, perfectly balanced in flavor, never too sharp or too sweet. We laughed, we decorated, and we compared artwork as we layered candy buttons and intricate icing on each cookie canvas. Gingerbread wasn't just about eating. It was the act of creating together that made these cookies timeless. 23. Hermit cookies. Chewy, spiced, and filled with hidden surprises, Hermit cookies were the quiet stars of many 1970s cookie tins. Though their name might sound old-fashioned, their flavor and texture were anything but. Studded with raisins, dates, and nuts, they packed an unexpected richness, hearty, comforting, and perfectly suited for chilly winter afternoons. The best part: the versatility. Some batches leaned heavier on cloves, while others went bold with cinnamon or nutmeg. Each home had a slightly different version, but everyone wrapped you in warmth. Hermit cookies came from a time when desserts didn't need frosting or flash to impress. They were meant to be satisfying, unfussy snacks that paired seamlessly with tea or coffee, or quietly delighted at the end of a big family meal. Grandma's version always had that unmistakable homemade touch, thick, dense, slightly sticky, and bursting with character in every bite. The dried fruit made them chewy, the nuts added crunch, and the spices provided that beloved seasonal heat. During family gatherings, they were the cookie you reached for when you weren't even hungry, just comforted. Hermits were humble, underrated, and wholly unforgettable. 24. Black and white cookies. Soft, round, and big enough to share, black and white cookies were the bakery-style classics that felt right at home in a grandma's kitchen during the 1970s. Also called half-moons, they balanced bold chocolate with smooth vanilla in every bite, creating perfect harmony with just a turn of the circle. These cookies weren't crunchy or crumbly. Their texture was more like miniature cakes, thick and tender, with a subtle vanilla-scented crumb. What made them unforgettable was what came after baking: the icing. Grandma would generously coat one side with rich cocoa icing and the other with a sugary vanilla glaze, letting them just barely meet in the middle. The result: a dramatic two-tone cookie as striking to look at as it was satisfying to bite into. Every family gathering, every dessert table, these cookies were crowd favorites. You didn't have to choose between flavors. You got both, exactly evenly. Whether wrapped in wax paper or served on porcelain plates, black and white cookies delivered more than nostalgia. They gave joy in two shades. And while fads came and went, they stayed. Precise, balanced, and deeply loved. 25. Icebox cookies. Icebox cookies were the undercover heroes of holiday baking, simple, versatile, and perfect for busy kitchens during the December rush. In our house, they represented freedom, the ability to prep cookie dough in advance, stash it in the fridge, then bake warm, fresh cookies right when guests arrived. The formula was brilliant. Mix the dough, roll it into a log, wrap it up tight, and chill. When the time comes, slice perfect rounds, load them on trays, and bake. Grandma knew this system like second nature, always keeping a few variations on standby. Some had chocolate chips, others hid chopped pecans or dried cherries. Sometimes she rolled the log in festive sugar or cinnamon before slicing, adding color and sparkle. But the real magic was in the bite, that buttery crunch on the outside, soft center, and rich flavor no one could resist. Icebox cookies made holiday baking feel less like a marathon and more like a moment of joy. No stress, no fuss, just warm smiles and golden edges. In the Christmas chaos, these cookies were the pause, proof that planning ahead could taste as good as spontaneity. 26. Molasses cookies. Deep, dark, and craving a cup of tea, molasses cookies were the definition of cozy comfort during Christmas. Baked with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, their warm, earthy sweetness was unmistakable. It just felt like the holidays. Grandma's molasses cookies were soft in the center, crackled on the outside with a light sugar coating that sparkled. The smell alone, spicy, rich, nostalgic, was enough to pull you into the kitchen. Each batch told its own story. Rolled by hand, coated in sugar, then baked until they puffed ever so slightly. They weren't fancy, but they were real. The kind of cookie you reach for by instinct, not impulse. Molasses brought more than flavor. It added history, soul, depth. The cookies balanced spice with sugar in a way that hugged you from the inside out. Everyone had a favorite way to eat them, warm, cool, dunked, or snuck from the cooling rack. But no one ever stopped at just one. They were simple, grounded, and so satisfying. Every bite is a memory. Every scent is a time machine. 27. Lady Fingers. Light, crisp, and classy, Lady Fingers felt like the cookie equivalent of pearls. Originally made for royalty, these finger-shaped delights had graced dessert tables for centuries, and in the 1970s, they were still baked with love at home or bought for special recipes like tiramisu or trifle. They weren't sugar-heavy or loaded with sprinkles, they were refined, delicate, baked until golden and crisp, then sometimes lightly dusted with sugar. What made Lady Fingers special was their ability to transform, on their own, perfect companions to afternoon tea. But once layered with cream, fruit, or coffee-soaked liquor, they became soft, spongy miracles in every bite. Grandma kept them on hand both ways, dry in the cookie jar or tucked into masterpieces chilled in the fridge. For bakers of all levels, they offered versatility with a touch of grace. Their names fit. These cookies had etiquette, shaped with care and flavor that whispered instead of shouted. In a holiday spread full of flash, Lady Fingers offered quiet elegance, reminding us that sometimes the best things are the ones that don't try too hard.